and so we need to use our microphones, and I ask that our side meetings be conducted outside of chambers. But we do have three public hearings this afternoon. We'll ask everyone to be sworn in. It will conduct the same procedure this evening at 7 o'clock. Everyone is invited back for the 7 o'clock meeting. In reference to these public hearings, you'll be sworn in yet again. After that 7 o'clock meeting, the committee then will develop a recommendation that they will make to all of council, either in favor, against, or to table, take time on an item. So that's the procedures for the public hearings. At this time, I'd like to ask a representative from our law department to please swear in anyone who wishes to testify before the committee today.
Is it
okay? Very
anyone
good.
who is going to testify, please stand up, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, the first item that's up for public hearing is a resolution adopting the 2019 Capital Investment and Community Development Program, legally referred to as the Capital Investment Budget.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair, committee members. Helen Tomick from the Planning Department. The City Administration annually prepares a capital investment community development program for City Council consideration. The budget specifies types, locations, costs, and general descriptions of the capital investments proposed throughout the year of 2019. The 2019 program includes recommendations for street and sidewalk improvements, improvements to parks, improvements to public facilities, the purchase of police, fire, and public service vehicles, the purchase of a ladder truck for the fire department, completion of fire stations 2 and 4, debt service on previously financed capital project, and ongoing upgrades to our water and sewer systems. The objectives of the budget are to construct or rehabilitate facilities that are vital to the City of Akron residents, encourage private investment throughout, thereby increasing the city's tax base and annual revenues, leveraging federal, state, and private funds wherever possible to fund our current capital projects, and to provide capital improvements in support of long-term growth consistent with the city's land use and development guide plan. The 2019 capital investment programs recommends approximately $341 million in investments. This includes $97 million in local funds, $5.8 million in regional funds, $190 million from the state of Ohio, $43.6 million of federal funds, and $3.9 million of resources. The planning staff will conduct a detailed budget review this afternoon at 4 o'clock in council chambers. The review tonight or this afternoon will focus on transportation, parks and recreation, public facilities, housing and community services, economic development activities, and miscellaneous parks. Furthermore, on Monday, January 28th, we will hold an additional review session in council chambers at 4 o'clock, and that review session will focus on water and sewer capital needs for the City of Akron. We would request final approval of the budget by February 14th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open up the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the proposed 2019 Capital Investment and Community Development Program. Anyone here wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Capital Investment and Community Development Program. Anyone here wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Very good. Anyone wishing to speak against the 2019 Capital Investment and Community Development Program? Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone against? Very good. We'll close the public hearing and open it to any committee members that may have questions or comments. Okay, hearing none. Mr. Kilby, I saw your hand was up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Helen, I thought I saw something. We're borrowing some money to pay for some things. You didn't mention borrowing. You mentioned the other sources. Did you mention how much we're going to borrow?
Part of that includes that's part of the local government.
So how much are we borrowing?
I believe, around $14 million.
Okay, so that's just considered general obligation debt?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So what percentage of the entire capital budget is earmarked for debt service now?
I have it upstairs in my office.
We'll be going through this at 4
Yes,
o'clock.
at 4 o'clock. We'll go into those details at 4 o'clock.
All right, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Very good. Hearing none, we'll now move on to item number 2. This is an ordinance authorizing a conditional use to establish a child daycare business center at 1536 Briding. Mr. Antonucci.
Mr. Chairman, committee members. Dana McNeil is requesting permission to establish a child daycare business center at this location. The proposed daycare center would occupy the basement area of the 1,260 square foot, one-story bi-level building. Care for a maximum of 12 children at a time would be provided by the petitioner and 2 part-time assistants. The basement area contains separate areas for care of infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school-aged children. Child care services will be available Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to midnight. Weekend hours are from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. No changes are proposed to the interior or the exterior of the house. The entire backyard is enclosed by a chain-link fence. Petitioner has operated Fun World Daycare for 11 years and has been at this location for 6 months. Since the children are dropped off and picked up at varying times of the day, traffic congestion should not be an issue. Providing care for up to an additional 6 children would not significantly raise the level of activity on this property nor have a detrimental effect on nearby houses, and both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, sir. At this point, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request at 1536 Briding? Anyone here wishing to speak in favor? Anyone in favor? Okay, very good. Is there anyone wishing to speak against the conditional use request at 1536? Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone? Very good. We will now close the public hearing and open up to committee members. Is there any questions or comments? Mr. Mobian?
I'm assuming since this has been a business in operation, that the only reason this person is here is because of the numbers?
That's correct. She had up to 6, is allowed to have up to 6.
Right. And we've had a number of individuals come down lately. Do we have a time frame? Is it just is it a legal issue that we just need to address?
Well, it is, yeah, because our zoning code allows only up to 6 in a residential without getting special approval. BZA up to 9, but then anything more than 9 needs the conditional use approval. We do have a condition on this that it run with that petitioner, and that if she were to sell the house, then that's lost on for that next property owner.
Right. And my question has more to do with, do we have a time frame in which we plan to make the adjustments to our rules so that because we wouldn't be here in this case otherwise, is that correct?
That's correct. I guess if we wanted to make any text changes to the zoning code, we could look into that, and we could go through Planning Commission and bring it to City Council to see if that's something the council wants to do.
Yeah, I would suggest that we look at that. I mean, if the law department has any reasons why we shouldn't, I mean, that would prevent individuals from having to come down and go through this process.
And we can look into that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Kilby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This development or this conditional use is in my ward, and I've driven by it. I've talked to the lady. I have no problems with what they're doing. The neighbors don't mind, so I think we should pass this out tonight. She asked me if she should come down. I said, I don't know. I'll talk to you if it's necessary, but in other words, should she come down tonight?
I would say yes, just to take it serious. You don't know if someone's going to show up or not.
Okay.
All
right.
I would recommend that.
I'll recommend she comes down then.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Very good. We do see quite a few of these, and we do oftentimes, typically, there is no issues with them. I would not, I'd like to have a further discussion about, just giving that away and not letting the committee or council have a say-so in terms of the 12 folks within a neighborhood. We haven't had any issues, obviously, but there's always that one that could come up, and giving that council ward representative the opportunity to weigh in and add conditions if needed, or to tweak or whatever, I think is a good thing for the council. Ms. Mobian.
Mr. Chair, my request doesn't change that at all. I'm requesting that we address the number issue. If there are other issues, they should come before us. And barring none, I think it's just a perfunctory issue, time that we're spending, because the state has approved the 12, and it's just a matter of us adjusting our rules and regs to comply with the state regs. And if we do that, it saves people time from coming down here if there are no issues. And it sounds like the ones that have come down to request the conditional use have all operated in satisfactory condition. And I just hate for people to have to go through unnecessary time. But if there are issues, certainly there's no reason why we shouldn't talk about them.
I do respectfully disagree, but that's, and we can talk about it further.
Only thing I'm
Absolutely.
suggesting is
Absolutely.
that we discuss it with the council, the rule change, and what would it take to make that. And then if we find that we make the adjustment, we just make the adjustment.
So therefore, if somebody come in with 12 children at their house, they wouldn't need to come down, we would just,
Unless there's, I would imagine that neighbors or others would have complained about the services or something.
we'd be giving up our
Otherwise, we're
authority.
just having folks come down just to comply with what they're getting, the okay from the state.
Yeah, we can certainly continue that conversation, absolutely. But in the interest of time, we'll now move on to item number 3, of which we have a public hearing, authorizing conditional use to establish a medical marijuana processing facility at 844 East Talmadge Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Ohio Medical Solutions proposes to renovate this 11,293 square foot, one-story brick and masonry block building to process medical marijuana. The medical manufacturing that will be done will include taking raw materials purchased from licensed cultivators and then grinding, extracting, filtering, formulating, processing, and packaging extracted cannabis oils. The front portion of the S-shaped building will contain office space, including a security office and a vestibule. The former warehouse area will contain rooms for processing, packaging, and storage. All shipping and receiving will be conducted indoors. The entire perimeter of the property will be enclosed with an 8-feet-high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire and under constant video surveillance. All products will be stored in a highly secured vault. The petitioners state they will create approximately 20 to 30 jobs that will generate an estimated payroll annually of $1 million. One objective of the Land Use and Development Guide Plan is to encourage the adaptive reuse of older vacant industrial buildings no longer appropriate for modern production processes. This building was constructed in 1954 as an auto service garage. Proposed repurposing of this building into a medical marijuana processing facility will be harmonious within this industrial area. Both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Okay, very good, thank you. We'll now open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request for a medical marijuana processing facility at 844 East Talmadge Avenue? If you could please provide for us your name and address.
Sir, hit that little red button on the bottom there. That should make it better.
Okay, is that better?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I just wanted to really introduce the company. Ohio Medical Solutions is part of a Vireo Health, which is, we operate in 6 states. So we're licensed in Minnesota, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Rhode Island, and Ohio. We're a physician-led group. And this process facility will be built out to a clean room specification. So it's an ISO 7 and ISO 8 certification, which is a pretty high standard. So it's a self-imposed standard to meet any kind of pharmaceutical FDA type regulations. And we are looking forward to be part of the community, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use requests at 844 East Talmadge Avenue? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Very good. Anyone wishing to speak against the conditional use request? Anyone against? Anyone? Very good. Hearing none, we'll now open it up to the committee members. Any questions or comments? I see Mr. Kilby. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Neal?
Just have a question. Are all of these that are coming before us, ones that came before us with the initial licensing agreements a while back?
Yeah, a lot of them have applied for licenses even before coming through for the conditional use, but we've had cultivators, dispensaries, and now this is the first full processing facility that we have.
I guess
So,
I'm just trying to get an understanding of how many of the combination are now coming into our community. So I know we voted on approving a lot of, are all these that are coming before us ones that we've already approved as far as licenses are concerned, or are some of these new?
no, so there's a process where they would get a state license. There's a state license requirement, there's a conditional use approval requirement, and there's a City of Akron license requirement. The City of Akron license comes after the conditional use process, so he will still have to apply for the city license. So he's already gotten approval from the state. He'll need to get this conditional use approved, and then he would go on for the city license.
When a lot of the, my terminology may be wrong, but distribution points came before us a while back for license-like approval. I forget how many we approved at that time. The point I'm getting to, I'd like to get an idea if we can kind of get a map on, no matter be they a medical facility, a dispensary, or whatever, if we could get an idea of where these places are located throughout the city right now, and how many of them we have, because it's almost, with this being so new, we don't know what the impact is going to be in the city as a whole, and especially in the communities where we're allowing these to set up. I'd like to just get a picture on where are most of the ones that we approved, where are they located?
I can get those to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kilby?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is also in my ward, Ward 2. I have no problems with it. It's a good location to do this kind of stuff. I just had a couple questions. When we first started this medical marijuana stuff, I was under the impression, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, that people aren't going to actually get the marijuana to smoke. They were going to vape it, or, I mean, what is it? Are they actually, the people that get medical marijuana, are they actually going to get marijuana to smoke? Or is it just some derivative of marijuana?
No, it's not smokable, and I think Mr. O'Neill could probably better elaborate on that, but no, it can't be smoked. I do know that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
In short, that's true and that's accurate. So what we would be doing is really, so you've got cultivators that grow the plants, they harvest it, and then we buy the plant material from them, and we extract the oils out of the plant using an ethanol extraction process, and then it goes through the steps that Mr. Antonucci described, where it's processed into medicine, and the delivery of the medicine would be cartomizers that could be vaporized, or there's oral solutions and tinctures, or gel caps.
Okay. All right. The marijuana that you're going to process, is it going to be locally grown marijuana from Akron? Because I know there's a couple growing sites right around the corner from you. Are you going to, where are you going to get your marijuana, I guess is my question.
It'll be from licensed growers in the state of Ohio. We hope that there's some that are in Akron. We haven't established any formal wholesale agreements with them yet.
So let me ask you this. How do they price their marijuana? Is it just like the market, whatever they can get for it, and you shop around for the best deal? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, there's, as the market establishes itself, so I mean, in different states, you see different price points. There isn't a lot of cultivators, so based on there's a level of scarcity there, but there's also a high demand driven by the patients and the dispensary owners to get the medicine that we create. So it'll regulate itself, but it's an open
Right.
market.
So is anybody else doing this in this area that you know of?
The processing, I'm not aware of
Okay.
another in this
All right.
area.
So where are these, I was reading the newspaper over the weekend, and it's about ready to go. Where are they going to get their marijuana? I mean, the product, the doctors or whoever dispenses it, where are they going to get it if there's nobody in this area, processing it? Is there other people close by that do it?
Yeah, there are. There's several. I don't remember the exact number of dispensaries in the state, but that's the point of sale to the consumer. So all of our transactions are business to business.
Okay. So how many states are you doing business in, your company?
6.
So, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
First, Mr. Neal, and then Samples, and then Ms. Moby. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back with our initial discussion just about the industry as a whole, one of the questions we had was community benefit agreements. A lot of companies came with their own community benefit agreements. Again, I know these are all different phases within the industry, but for our benefit, I don't know if we've set a standard that what we would look for in a community benefit agreement, but if we could look at the ones that have been presented to us, I don't know if this company's coming with a community benefit agreement on, what added value they're going to bring to the community, but if we could get a copy of those, please, and then we could talk to our law department about seeing if we can create some kind of standard, because again, we don't know what the overall impact of this industry is going to have in the community. It'd be good to have a good relationship with all the companies and have a memorandum of understanding of what's expected.
Samples?
I have a quick question for you. So I know we have our growers, our processors, and now in our dispensaries, and you're saying that you're hoping that you're able to do business with those here in the city of Akron. I don't know if that's something that could be written into there, but it almost seems like there's no benefit to the city if they're not doing business with the ones who are growing in the city, especially when they're less than like 500 feet away from each other. So I don't know if that's something we can discuss, especially if there's not a community development agreement there. It just seems we've got growers here. Now we have a processor coming, and then we have dispensaries that have been approved. How does that benefit Akron when they're going to gross $1 million a year? Just something to think about. I'd like for us to talk a little more about that. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Samovian?
I guess I'm curious, and I'm going to be learning a lot about this, I'm sure. When you process the marijuana, is this when you infuse the medical part in it that will address the different conditions that they will be prescribed to treat?
No, there's no infusion. It's
Okay.
actually
Whatever the word is,
It's
I'm
the
sure.
it's so the cultivators will have different strains, and each of these plants has a different cannabinoid profile. And the cannabinoids are there's a cannabinoid system that's what they react to in the body when they're taken. Some cannabinoids like cannabidiols, CBD, is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid, and it's also good for spasticity. So you'll see that very commonly used for people that have seizures. It's also can be used just for for anxiety treatment. And
So
then-
they're actually grown for certain
yeah,
conditions?
they actually have
okay.
cannabinoid profiles that are different. And we also can use systems in the laboratory to select different cannabinoids from a mix and actually put them into medicine so they have a higher concentration to treat whatever the ailment may be. We have ours on we call it the Vireo Spectrum. So we've got, it's color coded. So like a red is a high THC product, which would be used for severe pain, people that are going through chemotherapy, things like that. And then the indigo on the opposite end would be the CBD, which is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid, so it doesn't get people the high feeling that you'd get from a high THC product. And then there's something in the middle, green we call it, and that's where very common with MS patients where they're dealing with spasticity and pain. And so that's how we, the medicine comes in that kind of a spectrum.
So I know that some of them are edible, and at least
Yeah,
what
we
I've
don't-
read.
Yeah, it's state by state. So there won't be any edibles at this point. It's all going to be just the vape, the cartomizers that can be vaped, the gel caps, and oral solutions.
Oh, okay. And your processing plant would do all those different ways of,
Yeah, so we take the raw material, and we hope that it is from cultivators in Akron, and I think it's likely, but we also have to make sure that their standard is to our standard. So until we know that, it's hard to commit to that relationship. But assuming it is, we take in that raw material, we send out finished goods. So all the manufacturing happens at our facility.
so what kind of qualifications would someone need to have to work in your processing plant?
The range would, I mean, it'll be everything from PhDs in biochemistry to pharmaceutical or lab techs to security guards to a general manager that probably has more of like a Six Sigma type manufacturing background. So it's a real full spectrum.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the support security staff. I'm just thinking of those that are actually working with the product.
Yep, it would be, I mean, they go through, are you looking for more like the educational background or?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like a lab tech all the way up to someone who's got a PhD. I mean, that's the range. So anything from an associate's degree to a doctoral degree.
So how many people do you anticipate hiring?
At least 20 in the first year.
Do you plan to, would you find that level of personnel local, or have you explored the market yet?
We plan to do a job fair, but we are confident that the location will attract the best local talent.
Okay. Thank you
good.
very much.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Samples? I'd ask that we stick to zoning.
Sorry, just one
Zoning.
final question. So when you're processing and you're extracting, what are you doing with the leaf, the final product of it? Are you using all of it to completion, or what are you doing with the leaf to discard it?
So what we'll be buying is the flower. So the marijuana leaf that you commonly see, and those won't ever even come into our facility. It'll just be the flower to the bud. And the waste is really minimal, and what it looks like is like tar, because it goes through an extraction process. There's no plant waste. It's actually like it's an extract, and so then we have to go through state procedures and have written SOPs on how to deal with the waste. So it doesn't go in the normal trash.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll now move on to item number 4. And I'd like to invite all those individuals who are here this afternoon for the public hearing and ask if they would like to come back this evening at 7 o'clock. You're welcome to do so, at which time the committee will make a recommendation to council. Item number 4, though, is we had seen last week. This is reference the lease agreement with the Akron Zoological Park to lease city-owned land at 500 Edgewood Avenue to operate a zoo. So, very good. Mr. Luddle? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. There were some questions that came up last week, and we have Doug Pykar from the zoo that's going to give a brief presentation. Mr. Moore is passing out a handout that he'll briefly go through to address the questions that were asked last week and any other questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Luddle. Mr. Pykar?
Thank you for having me here today, and I do want to apologize for not being here last week. We weren't notified we were on the agenda, or I certainly would have been here. I do take this very seriously, and I wanted to have the opportunity to go and address all the questions that were raised and any others that you may have. So if you go through the packet that's just been released, it starts with our mission statement, where we connect your life to wildlife while inspiring lifelong learning and conservation action. And I wanted to give a little bit of a history of the lease agreement. The lease agreement was originally entered into in 1980, and the purpose of the lease was for a newly formed nonprofit board to effectively save the zoo so that the zoo did not need to close. And the result of that was for the last 38 years, that lease that operated until the one that we have in front of us right now. Since that time, the zoo's nonprofit board has made it a priority to ensure excellent stewardship of public funds and also to invest those funds effectively into our mission to benefit Akron and all of Summit County. The relationship has really supported the zoo and the city because I think one of the things that those of you who know me well know that I won't stand behind something unless it truly is a win-win. That's what it's all about. The Akron Zoo and its mission is about lifting this entire community and all of the residents at the same time. And we do truly stand behind the lease agreement the way it is now because we feel it will do that. The next slide, if you look at the overall history of attendance at the zoo, just since 2005, the attendance has increased by 86% to the last year within this economic impact statement being 2017, where we topped off at 416,000 guests in the park. What you'll also notice on the next page is that for every dollar of public investment in the zoo has actually returned $8 of economic impact to the city of Akron. And I want to talk a little bit about where those numbers came from, because when the zoo began to discuss actually doing an economic impact statement, which had not been done in the history of the zoo, we went to the chamber. The chamber said to us, get someone outside of Northeast Ohio to do it so that they don't have a pony in the race. So we ended up going through a review process and selected a company in Chicago called Market and Feasibility Analysts. They have done this kind of work for other zoos and aquariums that are accredited by the AZA all around the country. So we're confident in their work. And that work yielded the $1 of public investment to $8 in economic impact return. If you look at the next page, the real dollar value of that economic impact return from 2011 to 2017 was $487 million. That's both direct, indirect, and induced impact. The next slide looks at that activity and its growth over that period of time. And from 2011 to 2017, the economic activity of the Akron Zoo inside the city of Akron grew by over 37%. When we talk about job creation, which is the next slide, the Akron Zoo and its economic activity currently supports over 1,000 jobs inside the city of Akron. That does not include the 120 employees that are permanent at the zoo, nor the additional 100 employees that we hire during our peak season. The next slide looks at labor income. The labor income has increased by over 33% over this 7-year period, and the sum total of the 7 years for labor income sits at $20.6 million. State and local taxes generated by the zoo's economic activity have increased by over 41% over that 7-year period of time, averaging $2.5 million in taxes back to the city of Akron, and a sum total across the 7 years of $17.5 million. Now, that as the background, I then took the questions that came from the last meeting, and I'm going to address the 3 main questions specifically. In answering them, I've picked the major programs at the zoo, not everything that we do, because I felt that the major programs really address the issue. The first one is, what are the royalties to the zoo from the mineral rights? And if you turn to the next page, you'll see that in 2015, the mineral rights yielded the royalties about $3,300. In 2016, $3,200. In 2017, $83. And in 2018, $192. One of the key things is, since the mineral rights, which had been part of the original lease agreement, were established in the name of the zoo, we've seen the royalties reduce annually over that period of time, to the point today where they don't even pay for the maintenance of the wells themselves. The next question, what discount programs have been provided to Akron residents as a result of the city's relationship with the zoo? So I'm starting first with our Community Appreciation Days, which is a program that is countywide, but I've made the answers very specific to the city of Akron. This program started in 2001 to offer free admission to all Summit County residents as a thank you for their support. Free tickets within the city of Akron can be picked up at the zoo, at the city's water department, or at the treasurer's office. The community days always occur during the month of September, so it's nice and warm weather. And we have provided $45,000 worth of free tickets to the city of Akron every year. That totals over 32,000 tickets in the last 7 years for a sum total of $317,000. The next program I'd highlight is something that we just started a few years ago. We wanted to look at free admission programs that might be able to build programmatic elements and partnerships with others. So starting in 2016, Martin Luther King Day is now free at the Akron Zoo next Monday for anybody who wants to come. In partnership with the Akron NAACP, the Akron Urban League, and the Akron Public Library, on those 2 dates so far, we've seen 3,400 individuals, and the value of that day for free admission is $33,000. President's Day, a partnership with Summit County Historical Society, we've seen over 7,500 individuals take advantage of that with the value of $73,000. And then we've also added an additional free admission day on Election Day with fewer people taking advantage thus far. 619 with a value of over $6,000. So when you add together the community days as well as the free admission day program, you see it's a significant sum. The next discount program I'd highlight, because I do know one of the specific questions was asked, what programs target low-income residents or underserved audiences? This past July, the zoo, along with Stan Hewitt, the Akron Children's Museum, the Art Museum, and several others joined together and launched collectively Museums for All. This program was supported through the Arts Now Alliance, and at the zoo, what that means is that there is a 75% discount for anyone who has an Ohio Direct card, an EBT, or a SNAP card. They show it same way that they would show a membership card to the zoo, so nobody knows any different, and what it yields is 4 $3 tickets to the zoo that they can use on any non-event day. The reason events are excluded at all the venues is because the events cost the venues more money, and therefore they're excluded. From July to December this year, over 1,100 people use that program. Continuing on now to focus on Akron Public Schools, Backpack Adventure has been a program that's been in place since 2007. Where students receive free school supplies in order to get off to a successful year. There's over 2,700 to 3,000 students and caregivers annually taking part in the program for about a $29,000 benefit annually. When you look at the other program, our Akron Public School No-Cost Science Program partnership, every 5th grader for the last 3 years and every 1st grader starting this September receive free in-classroom science instruction from our professional staff and free visits to the zoo to augment that. So overall, the benefit to the city from the zoo is a $487 million economic impact, 1,000 jobs in the city, 400,000 people annually in downtown Akron. The fact that the zoo has been able to leverage its presence in an economically depressed area to stabilize the property values and also to bring additional people and resources to that area. The total of about $100,000 annually to Akron Public Schools in support of both Backpack and the 5th and 1st grade programs, $45,000 a year in free admission tickets, $9,000 a year in free admission to keep Akron beautiful for the folks who clean up our city. And in the end, we were able to leverage this for the first time ever to receive a $500,000 appropriation from the state capital budget, which is why I'm asking for your support of this lease, because if you see on the last page, we are currently unable to submit for that appropriation because the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission needs to receive resolution of this lease agreement before they will release any funds. So I do ask for your support today, and I thank you.
Very good. Thank you for coming down. I think many of us here realize the evolution of the zoo and where it was in 1980 and where it is today. This is truly a partnership, and I'm looking at Mayor Horrigan there. I know he realized this is a partnership, I think, with both the zoo and the city of Akron. It's become a destination for a lot of folks all over Northeast Ohio, and thank you for There's a considerable amount of information here. The education and the economic impact, you know, it's measurable and it's real and tangible, and, you know, and how you take care of our children in terms of providing free days and so on and so forth, and educating and the like. A great source of pride, I think, for many of us here in Akron. Appreciate everything you do. We do have some questions, though.
Sure.
And so we'll open it up for questions. Ms. Amobian.
I didn't ask any questions last week, but I do have one today. And I know I've been to your Zoo many times and met with you on several occasions. I certainly share everything that's been said. I think it's just a wonderful jewel in our community. The one question I do have has to do with the area next door to the zoo. For many years, I played at that tennis court. You could probably tell that I haven't played for a while, but that's okay. I visit there sometimes, and I know that they still have the program where the kids go there to practice. And it's my understanding, I'm not sure if I'm correct, and someone can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a plan for the zoo to either take that land over or eventually expand there. But until that time, will we be maintaining that tennis court so that people who love to play there will continue to play until there's some, you know, expansion where the zoo will either take it over or whatever? Because again, I visit there sometimes and talk to people who are actually playing. I just want to make sure that it's kept up to the standard that all the other tennis courts around our city are kept up to.
Sure, and actually there may be somebody else who's better to answer this. What I can tell you the role we have played, we have convened conversations for over a decade now about how to best address what the local community wants from those courts. But the zoo doesn't maintain the courts. The zoo doesn't currently own the courts. There's nothing more than conversation that has happened. And the conversation in general has reflected the people using the courts really wanting championship courts, but the space that there can't provide it size-wise. So I think someone from the city may be the better.
President Somerville would like to make a comment, reference the question.
Yeah, just to better answer Councilman Mobian's question, actually, we recently invested money into resurfacing the courts. The courts were in really bad condition, a lot of dangerous cracks, so the courts have been resurfaced so that people can continue to play on them safely.
Yeah, I know. For a long time, we had to request benches and upgraded nets and all those kinds of things. But I just want to make sure, you're saying that the zoo doesn't have any plans immediately to take it over? So
it isn't our land, so.
I mean, you don't have any plans to lease it from the city or anything at this time?
There's only been conversation, and if the courts were to be relocated, yes, there would be interest in the land because it's right up against the zoo.
Oh, sure, there's no question about that. But no, we thank you for coming down. I've always appreciated the time that we spent together and you sharing with us the things that you're doing. And I have managed to go up that hill several times. But it's wonderful what's happening at the zoo. So thank you very much.
Further questions or comments? Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you for coming down and thoroughly answering our questions. When folks knew that this was one of the conversations, one of the things that were asked of me, and this may have been addressed, there's always been a concern about the John Brown Memorial Monument and the lack of access because it's back up. Has there been any discussion to make that some kind of way available for people to see? The way the zoo is now, I don't know if there's a way to make it to where people could get to it without actually going into the zoo, without, by changing the fencing, but has there been any discussion about that? Because that's been one of the talks about people in the community about the John Brown.
We'll give that to John Moore. Mr.
We have made arrangements for that to occur, and Mr. Pykosh can give you the details on the how you get access to the monument.
Yeah, for the 18, 19 years now that the monument has been inside the zoo's perimeter fence, the original agreement that we had with the city and the Historical Society is that we would protect the monument, because the monument, when it came inside the fence, was in, frankly, deplorable condition. We've worked and partnered with the city and the Historical Society. It's been cleaned up. It is available to anybody who wants to see it. I have personally led tours up there, as have many of my staff. We just ask that you call ahead and make an appointment to come and see it, and then I provide to take you up there, to be able to visit the monument, and then bring you back down. Because we have not, quote, altered the area, so it's just like it was before, other than the monument is fully protected and it was cleaned. So it is an issue where it's been open to anyone who wanted it for the last 18 years, and we will still do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm
Sure.
Very good.
Happy to hear that. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments, Mr. Swirsky?
A brief comment. Thank you for coming here today. I mean,
My
when I think
pleasure.
about the zoo, it's really something that, as an average citizen, as a parent, as a teacher, before I became a councilman, I was very, very proud of our zoo and bragged about it often and brought people from outside of the city down there because it's walkable, it's enjoyable, and it's educational. And I think it's just really impressive how outstanding your ability to collaborate and work with other organizations, and you truly have embedded yourselves in the networks that provide information and support to our young people, and I feel really good about you and what you do, and I think we're all very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
President
It's a labor of
Somerville.
love.
Thank you so much. Just more so a comment, just want to thank Doug Piakosh for all that he does. Of course, the benefits that we get from the zoo are tremendous. And one of the things, a couple of things that he didn't even mention of all the benefits is that really and truly Akron Zoo is a great community partner for those who live around the zoo. I just want to thank you. The zoo, and he didn't even mention this, they help to address the blight in our neighborhood. They help by addressing all of the vacant properties. They cut them, maintain them. So again, Doug, just want to thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion that we suspend the rules with a favorable report.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. With one abstention, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Neal abstain. Would you like a roll call? We'll do a roll call. Mr. Kamer? Aye. Mr. Neal? Mr. Sikorsky?
Aye.
Samovian? Got that? Very good. Now we'll move on to the balance of the agenda. I will recommend time on 5, 6, and 7. Time. And recommend, Mr. Kamer, do you have a comment referencing the item number 8?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, we took time on this petitioner's request, and over the last couple weeks, I was able to talk to some of the residents that I know very well at my coffee meeting, and then just last week we had our senior group meet for the first time because of the holidays, and spoke with a few of those residents that live around the petitioner's property, and had some good conversations with them, and made a couple phone calls over the weekend. So right now I would like to see if the committee would oppose this project or respectfully support my wishes, and I'll make that motion for an adverse report.
Second.
Very good. There's been a motion and a second for an adverse report on item number 8. All those in favor of an adverse report signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? The ayes have it. I will recommend that we take time on 9, 10, and 11, and that we file item number 12. We had already, I believe, Mr. Antonucci, addressed that item.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we'll file that particular item. Everyone in favor of filing signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. Somebody said aye. Yeah, this is item number 12. This is the Budget Dumpsters Limited Liability Corporation for conditional use to establish a dumpster rental business. This is one we had voted on a couple weeks ago. So the motion was to file that particular item because it's simply the petition. Okay.
Mr. Chair, on number 8, 9, and 10, 9, 10, and 11, you filed those?
Those, I believe, are time
Time, okay.
for the, I think so. Yeah, but until we vote on it officially, I mean, tonight I can recommend filing it, but it's not voted on by the whole. That's why. Okay. So time, 9, 10, 11, file 12. And then I believe time on the balance, short of any concerns. We will now move on to the new list of legislation. I think we may have, city view, is this the one we just, yeah, that's the one we just voted on. That was filed. I believe the only item that we do have is item number 3 under new list of legislation, approving the sale of vacant city-owned properties pursuant to the city's A Lot for Little program, determining said property is not needed for public use. That was withdrawn. Yes, that was withdrawn.
We got 1 and 2.
Well, this, on this here says 3, so, yeah. Okay, very good. So we will now call item number 3, item number 2 on your iPads, which is approving the sale of a vacant city-owned property pursuant to the city's A Lot for Little program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. This would be 2 side lot sales. Our standard price would be going to the abutting neighbors for open space. We would ask for consent agenda, please.
Consent agenda. Is there questions or comments? I assume for consent agenda? Is there a second on consent agenda?
Second.
All those in favor of consent agenda signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. Okay, this is the item that indicates A Lot for Little, and it's on your iPads, it's 3. On the agenda, the written agenda, it's 2. You just have to clean that up. The opposite, I'm sorry, 3 and 2. It's the Lot for the Little legislation under new list of legislation, the only piece we really have, right? No, it's not. Okay.
I have a piece coming in, and it's in my district. That's the only way I'm looking out for. It's 716 City View, item number 1. And it's amendment. We amended it for child daycare.
Okay. Which freaking number is that? Let's get all. Okay, I got it. Okay, so what item is this?
This is number 1 under new list.
Number 1?
Yes.
On everyone's list?
The one that I have.
Is that on everyone's list? Item number 1? It is 1 on mine. Okay. All right, item number 1 is authorizing conditional use to establish a child daycare center at 716 City View. Anybody?
Yeah, this is the, we added the, at Councilman Fusco and Councilman Somerville's request, adds a condition that ties essentially this use to the petitioner, that if it's sold, that conditional use is discontinued then.
Doesn't run with the land.
It doesn't run with the land, right.
Okay. Good. All right, very good. Questions or comments?
Yeah, just a question.
Yes.
So that needs to be requested, that doesn't happen automatically?
This was actually, it was a condition that was suggested when this was presented, that this be something that we look at for all of these that come through, basically for a daycare that is run by a particular person and petitioner in the home, that there's not a lot of substantial changes to that house, so it shouldn't necessarily run with that land, that if that person were to sell the house, then that conditional use is discontinued.
Yeah, no, I understand the point you're making, I was just assuming that just happened automatically, but it doesn't.
It will now.
It will now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have something, Ms. Sims?
Huh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember the chairman asked about that question the last time. Is that something that's going to be retroactive?
Well, it's a substitute ordinance, so with this ordinance, it's just now being...
On this one, but all the other ones we approved in the past will not.
So there's no, it's not retro?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Very good. Mr. President, would you like this voted upon this evening? Okay, very good. Is there a favorable recommendation with suspension of the rules? Is there one?
Favorable recommendation.
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it, very good. So, there's nothing else new on the agenda that, I'll just ask everyone come back at 4 o'clock for the budget review. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Yeah, the Green Committee will meet in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, then I'll cancel the committee. Well, I hate to meet and just to take comments.
That's okay.
Can I just cancel the meeting?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want, you're the boss. Yeah. Of your committee. Right. It's election time. Right. Right. No problem.
Because they want to present it later.
The Green Committee will not be meeting today. Yeah. But because the Green Committee isn't meeting today, we're going to move right into Parks and Recreation and Mr. Neal's presentation.
And before Park and Rec, I believe the mayor has a presentation. Who?
I didn't know that. It's a normal. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Neal. Ms. Sims? You ready? If we could call the Park and Recreation meeting. Ms. Amobi and Ms. Sims. Ms. Sims.
Okay, I'd like to call the Park and Recreation meeting to order, but before we start, I'd like to yield to the mayor. I believe he has a presentation he'd like to make.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for indulging me for just a couple of minutes before you get started. But I wanted to take a moment and recognize all of our 1,800 employees are special, but they went through a pretty arduous task, and I wanted to present to them a surprise proclamation before you guys all get started. So I'll let them just get set all day. They're used to moving around a bunch. Okay, all of you, this is an honor for all of you guys, so if you could stand at attention. No, I'm just kidding, you don't have to stand. In 2018, the Akron Recreation Bureau engaged in a comprehensive strategic planning process for the first time since 1969 report commissioned by then Mayor John Ballard in response to civil unrest. A diverse team of Recreation Bureau staff called the Connection Team played the pivotal role in the strategic planning process. The team consisted of, and when I called your name, not if, when I call your name, if you can please stand. Rika Wright, and I'm sorry if I messed up your first name. Allison Corvia, Brittany Schmokel, Doug Sutton, Jada Ransom, Jeff Merton, Jerry Rowland, Penny Bamba, Rachel Rauke. Is that everybody? Okay, good. The Connection Team helped develop a community needs assessment survey to create a new mission, vision, and value statements for the Bureau and develop strategies for embracing and managing change. Whereas the Connection Team successfully completed its mission to gather opinions to better create fun, meaningful experiences and relationships that foster growth and connectedness with our diverse neighborhoods to celebrate the city's great potential. Now therefore, I, Daniel Horgan, Mayor, City of Akron, do hereby proclaim Monday, January 14th as Akron Recreation Bureau Connection Team Day. So congratulations to all of you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Helen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the Park and Recreation Committee. If we can, yes, sir. If I could please have a motion to approve the last meeting's minutes from December 17th.
So moved.
Get a second? Okay. If there is any discussion, all in favor? Okay, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to acknowledge the work of the recreational staff and to point out that Mr. Rollins taught me how to play basketball. You know, when I was in 5th or 6th grade. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, since we have a full agenda, we'll jump right into it. So, Mr. Valley, are you going to kick us off, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Parks and Recreation Committee and the other members of City Council. We appreciate the opportunity to present the Recreation Strategic Plan. But first of all, I want to congratulate Brittany Schmokel for selecting an outstanding team. This team right here represents the residents of the City of Akron. I was very proud of the diversity and the selection of this committee. Last couple of years, the Recreation Department has been working hard on trying to change our image, and especially when it came to our renting of community centers and community centers. We're always trying to streamline them and try to make that process more easily, but what we had found out, we just weren't communicating our message the way that we should be communicating that message. But I want to thank Mayor Horgan and Chief of Staff James Hardy here for believing in the Recreation Bureau and working hard to secure the funding that we receive for this strategic plan. And I think what you're going to find out today is we're doing a lot of things pretty darn good, but we could do better. And that's what this plan is going to tell us to do. Where do we need to be better? What type of activities and programming do we need to provide for our kids and our senior adults and our youth sports and just the community at large out there using our ball fields and park space and things like that. So with that, I just wanted to mention one other thing. We completed 510 surveys, and this group, they got out in the streets, they got out in the trenches, they were at every community event, every community center. Every community center, every neighborhood, every ward in the city is well represented in the survey. So with that, I'll call on James Hardy, Chief of Staff.
Thanks, John. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, everybody here, Brittany's asked me to go through really quickly these slides, and I want to say a few things about this. So everything you see in this slide, I have no authorship of. It's everybody here that you see. So I'm going to get through these quickly because the team is really, I know, who you'd want to talk to, who are in the trenches. So if you have this, first of all, does everybody have a copy? Okay. So we'll go through this really quickly. By way of executive summary, and by the way, I invite Brittany and anyone on the team to just please feel free to stop me if I say something incorrect or if you want to expand on anything that I say. As John mentioned, what we found in summary is that the Rec Bureau, through its people, its programs, its parks, has an incredibly high perception of affordability, fun, and safety. The total number of venues, public spaces, including our parks, is enviable across the country. Not every city has the amount of community centers and parks that we do. Gives you a little bit about the overall administration of recreation, which you all know deeply about. Breaking down just briefly our citizen stakeholders that were interviewed for this process, 10% identified with multiple ethnic groups. In total, 26 unique combinations of ethnicity were presented and a total of 6 first languages. So we have a very diverse Akron, and this group did an incredible job to capture that. The single largest driver of favorable perception of the Akron Recreation Bureau was awareness of events programs overall offerings. So a simple way to put this is, if you use us, you love us. If you don't know much about us, you don't know what you feel. And so that's a huge opportunity for us. We did not hear overall that the people who are using Akron Recreation Services don't like it. In fact, they love it. So part of this that you'll see is we need to get our word out there in a much deeper way. So the next slide is really just an overview of the project timeline itself, and I won't go through that in great detail, but safe to say that the people who are assembled before you did the heavy lifting to get us to this point today. The survey process, just at a glance, it took about 7.5 weeks. As John said, you could not go to a summer event in 2018 and not see one of these folks out there with a tablet. It was incredible. A lot of the surveys were collected by the very people you see here today, walking, talking, and grabbing people at events. As John said, 1,510 total responses, representing 3,100 constituents. That is an incredible survey response for a city our size. Bravo. All locations of the city were represented. And again, our demographic breakdown, and I want to say that this group worked very hard, including going out and getting secondary survey responses when we were underperforming in a certain demographic to make sure that we matched our census tracts. And on the next page, you can see how well they did. So one of the key things I know that we always look at is the data valuable based upon demographics? Did you reach roughly the right amount of people in the right amount of places? And this group did. On this slide, you see the overall demographic summary. On the following slide, you will see it broken down by zip code. And a lot of the zip codes that we talk about in this chamber were captured and represented in a very large way. And we wanted to make sure that that was important to us and was important to this group. Key insights. As I said, ARB is well perceived in the areas of affordability, fun, and safety. So those are opportunities for us to hold on to and grow from. Awareness is a key driver of perceived value. So again, the more you use us, the more you like us. The most important communication channels that were identified by those surveyed was social media first, followed by email. There is some slight variances when you break it down by demographics, but overall, social media, then email, a little bit of text. Demographics and locations experience ARB differently. So one of the real values, I think, to ARB is that each community center really does strive to meet the needs of its individual community. but that also means you have 11 different flavors in terms of how people experience ARB. And so depending on who you are and where you are and what your community center is or what program you're enrolled in, you think slightly differently about that community center or that program. Safe to say, did I explain that well? Okay. Service preferences have clear organizational trends, but have differences by demographics. We'll get to this a little bit later. I think number 6 is important for council to see as well, and we can get into more deeply. But even though the Recreation Bureau does not supervise, Brittany does not supervise parks maintenance, and she does not supervise building maintenance, but everyone in this room is held accountable either way from the public perspective. So the public blames or gives credit to the Recreation Bureau on the state of facilities. So that's important for the administration, and John and I have we've talked about this as a cabinet, that, you know, as we look at how we better improve our organization internally, it's good for us to recognize that everyone seated here is held responsible for the state of affairs at our facilities, even though they have absolutely no ability to do anything about it based on the way we're currently structured. Building maintenance and parks maintenance handle a lot of those stuff for them, and try to. And then lastly, community events and the importance of aquatics were the highest rated service needs across all demographics. So it didn't matter where you came from in the city, what your background was, who you are. People want more community events, both in their neighborhoods, but then which just hear that people want to intermingle with other people that aren't like them, and they want to do it through rec. So they want the community events to help them learn about other parts of the city, not just their own. And then finally, without a doubt, I think this is one of the major changes, and you will see it later in our capital budget hearing starting in 2019. We're going to try and get after this. People love the pools. Jerry tried to tell me that the first day I started. People love the pools. They want the pools to stay. They want them to get better, and they want more aquatics activities in addition to the pools. They know we can't build more pools, but they want something else. And so we're going to start getting after the pools, but we're going to not just wait till 2020. We're going to get after it starting now. But water is important to this community, water activities. Oh, and Ball Street, sorry. People love Ball Street. So the next part is just really getting into some of the data. So the zone of quality is just a snapshot way for you to see how certain facilities and how certain demographics broke out in terms of their, how people rated them. So basically, you want to be in the top right-hand corner, which means you're above the average recommended Net Promoter Score and you're above the average rated ARB index score. So if you're in the top right-hand, you're cooking with gas and you want to build on that. And then obviously the lower left-hand corner is where you have the most room for opportunity. Safe, did I explain that right? Okay. So the next slide gives you a breakdown of our community subs. Yes, ma'am.
Does that, I don't know if you were able to extrapolate any extra, does this have to do more with the staffing there or the amenities?
All of the above. So I think it's safe to say, but chime in, I think people, when they rated both the ARB and their facility, they were looking at the people they see every day, the facilities, it was all together. So it could be that they absolutely loved the staff and the facilities were so-so, but they rated it highly because the staff made it happen.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess, you know, we always complain about not enough money in recreations. Hopefully we'll get more in there this year. But there are, you know, I know there's great staff everywhere, but the amenities aren't as great as I'd like to see them. So I would wonder, how are we looking at that so we can bring more equity and all that good stuff to all of the recreational centers?
Sure. So interestingly enough, when we actually asked the question about facilities, I think all of us in this room were hoping that people would rate them worse than they did, which would give us more ammunition. People overall, I think, want to see better facilities, but they just want to make sure the programming is there. And check me on this, but I think certainly they weren't rated the best facilities in Northeast Ohio, but because of the great staff, because of the programming, facilities were not as low rated as we thought they would. Now, we would agree, all of us agree, we need to, and you'll see that in here in a moment, prioritize facilities. But I think programming means as much or more to people as, obviously you need a facility that works, but I think programming is what people really were speaking to us about. And I'm not calling out any names, but while the vast majority of people love the staff, I think there are opportunities on the staffing level too to take a fresh look at how we approach each individual community.
So, before I became a member of council on the school board, I remember a group of young students come in and talking about some of the differences between the different community centers and why was this way, and why this wasn't this way, and it just doesn't seem like we could do better. And so sure. I think people get accustomed to what they get and more than understand that there is room for more. So I just add that as, I'm sure maybe it comes up in the report.
So looking at this, to read this chart, again, on this axis going up this way, all right, you have the ARB index. So these are standard deviations. So if you're right smack dab in the middle, you're right where everybody pretty much is. So I would say average, but just for the purposes of this explanation. And if you look here, it kind of gives you a bit of a snapshot of where people rated our individual community centers. Now, what you'll see on the next page, well, first before I go on to that, there's been a lot of talk in this chamber about the community learning centers. One of the things, the key findings from this is that there is an incredible brand emergency as it relates to the community learning centers. Nobody knows what they do, what you can do with them, who to call. So that's a huge opportunity for us to better utilize these assets, but feel free to jump in. But that was one of the things that came out strong to me when the data was that people pretty much, even those that aren't that aware of Recreation Bureau, know something about the Rec Bureau. When you ask people about community learning centers, they've heard of them, but they don't know how they would ever, very low amount of people know what they would do with them. So there's a huge opportunity there if we can clarify that for folks in terms of how you can use community learning centers, who to call, those types of things. On the next page, you get a breakdown of our demographics. So the more into the upper right-hand corner you get, those are populations that rated us highly effective and that they would recommend them to friends and peers, recommend recreation to friends and peers. The lower left-hand corner is the opposite of that, and so they're less likely to have rated us highly and less likely to recommend to peers and friends. We've broken this down on the overall findings slide on the next page for you. Ed Davis was the highest net promoter score of all the facilities. And in looking at the data, people love the Tiny Tot basketball. They absolutely love that program. And a lot of the people that turned in the surveys were part of that program and rated it really high. But it's a great example of how even a community center that gets great net promoter scores from its constituents still has opportunity for new programmatic growth. There's still other constituencies or programs that could be looked at. All facility supervisors, to your point, Councilwoman Sims, have developed specific plans, which Brittany and others can speak to, based on the individual facility reports that were generated from the data. And if, I know ward council people in particular, if you want the data on your community center, Brittany does have that, and we can get that into your mailbox. Response rates for all the pools make data inconclusive for either facility, so there just weren't enough people that specifically talked about the pools, but the importance of aquatics, as I said, was sky high through the roof across all demographics. So we didn't get a great amount of data in terms of specifically what people want out of the 3 pools we have, but everybody said, keep the pools, we want more aquatics activities in the city of Akron. Larger groups such as females, all ethnicity groups of color, and the 65 plus age group all rated ARB above average and are very aware of ARB. So that's our base. Those are our people. They use us a lot. They rely on us, and we need to continue to grow that. Somewhat aware or not aware are below average and comprise predominantly of white men. So white men are not using ARB to a great extent, and therefore they didn't rate us very highly and they weren't very aware of our programming. A key insight, again, is that all demographics experience ARB slightly differently, and this is going to require facility leadership development plans, particularly action plans that reflect each facility's demographic variances. So each facility has to look, and they have done this, at the data based upon the constituents they serve in that catchment area. So as a result, REC developed a new purpose, vision, and mission statement, which I love all three, but I'm biased. And particularly what I love about them is the mission statement, where it says quality of life and encourage deeper connections within the community. A strand through all of the data were that people from all different areas of the city would like to meet and mingle with other people from the city that aren't like them, and they are asking REC to help facilitate that. That's incredible. And I'm not surprised. We're a great welcoming community, but it's a change in the way that we look at REC, not just from like, is that playground there? Yes, we have a playground, check the box. It's about creating connections for people, not just always about the physical space. So finally, what are we going to do about all this? So Brittany and the team have broken it down into a 5-year plan. There's things they want to accomplish in year 1, things they want to accomplish by year 3, and things they want to have accomplished by year 5. And then I'm going to sit down and we're going to let everybody who actually did the work talk about it. So first things first, an organizational reset, branding and awareness campaign to demonstrate that this is a new, different, and improved recreation department. This gets after the more you know us, the more you like us. So we got to get out there. People need to know our offerings. It needs to be easier and more accessible in terms of signing up for things through RecDesk and other technological advancements that we're going to be making. But that's the first things first, is let's get out there and let people know how great we are and the things we have going on. Specifically, staff leadership development plans. I'll let Brittany talk more about this if you have questions, but again, safe to say, how do we align the staff around the new mission, vision, purpose, and values? How are the facility plans coming along? How are they being implemented? Those types of things. By year 3, we want to have established that social media platform that people called for in the strategic plan. We want to be offering localized events monthly that really tie into the neighborhood flavor, and major community events that bring people from all over together each quarter. So everybody knows the Akron Arts Expo. Who doesn't go to the Akron Arts Expo? People want more of those, and they want them in different areas of the city where you can go and experience a different part of Akron. Again, technology, fully implementing RecDesk. We've talked about Wi-Fi. This council will be happy to know we're just going to do it anyway, even though we didn't get the grant. So we're going to have Wi-Fi in our community centers. Erica, I promise, we're going to have a community. But also, how do we utilize email tools, push notifications, other things that really make it super simple for people to access the programs that ARB offers. And finally, by year 5, again, to the points that have been raised earlier, we will have prioritized the upgrading and the upkeep of our community centers, playgrounds, and our existing pools, of which there are 3, and I will change that, Doug. We also want to explore, determine, invest, and build new aquatics programs. So as you'll see later today, we're conceptualizing the construction of 2 splash pads in the city of Akron for 2019. We don't want to wait. The pools are going to take a little longer because we want to do them right, so we want to make sure that we do a design that encompasses the stakeholders and the council members in terms of that. The pools themselves are actually in good shape, but if you've been to one of our pools, everything around it needs a lot of love and probably just needs to start over. So we want to look at that based upon these results. So by year 5, we want to have facilities on par with the programming or well on their way as it relates to aquatics, and then specifically our community centers. And then lastly, this group, and I have no doubt that they will be, because they already are, they want to be identified in the state as one of the leading innovators in recreation and community connectivity. And with that, I give you the group that put this all together.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Would anyone from the group that did the work like to speak before we go into asking questions? Oh, not that you didn't do any work.
I didn't. I just got them the money and they went for it.
Okay. Are you ready to take questions from us? Well, some of these questions may be for the administration, and I'll open up for the committee. I noticed in our discussion, we were talking about rec centers. Any conversation about fields?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, fields only came up a little bit in saying that many people thought that we had too many baseball fields and looking at utilizing that space for things that are up and coming.
Okay. Well, you're well aware of the conversations that we've had, and I won't take up time here. And I think that, again, depends on demographically where they fall. Some have too many, some don't have enough. That's something we could talk about. So I'll table that part on the fields, and we'll move to the next one. Before I have a list of questions and comments. Before I ask them, I do want to ask if anyone on the committee has any questions. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Sims.
So just on the data collection, just a point of clarification, are all of the folks Akron residents?
No, the vast majority were.
So what percentage were non-Akron residents?
I think it's in there. Jeff, do you have it right there?
Just quickly, just one. 47% were non-Akron residents?
I'm sorry. That don't work in Akron.
Turn your microphone on, please.
I can get that in my big data book. It was a small percentage, and small meaning like 10 to 15% didn't live in the city. It was most folks lived in the city. Like if you look at the zip code data, I don't know off the top of my head which zip codes out of like 44333 are not in Akron, but like the vast majority of our folks were. But there were some that we surveyed at events that were not living in Akron, but either worked in Akron or attended that event from another community. In fact, I remember seeing one of the open-ended responses. Somebody literally wrote, "I live in Portage County, but I love going to your events, so have more events."
So we say about 15%.
Don't quote me, but I think it was like 10 or 15%. It was a small percentage, but we will get that exact one for you.
Okay, thanks. So when we looked at the surveys relative to the community centers, were those surveys taken at the centers, or were they taken in the community talking about centers near their homes? Well, so you would say 50% was taken at the community and 50% at the center. Does that be a fair assessment?
Just make sure you flip your mic on.
It's hard to say where they took the survey, because we didn't specifically ask where they were while they were taking the survey in the survey. But what we can say is that they were taken at events, they were taken at community centers, and they were asked to list their most used center and their second used location as well, to rank those.
This is my final one. So, and they really all tied together. I just won't belabor the issue, but do you think the residents were able to differentiate between, like, say, the towpath, Civic Commons, and the community centers?
There was a percentage that some of people are not aware of what we do and what we oversee. So there was some confusion, and maybe they do think that we're part of the Civic Commons or that recreation is leading that. So that's one thing that we hope to improve upon with our awareness campaign this year.
But I would say the folks that were very aware and liked it knew exactly. And those were far more than the folks that rated us, lower because they weren't aware. But there were some people in there, for example, that gave opinions about Lock 3, which technically is not part of rec, but obviously plays a huge role in recreational activities. But I would say the vast majority of folks, certainly a plurality, so more than 50%, 60%, knew who these folks were. But there's definitely, without a question, one of the takeaways is we need to do a better job of telling people what we offer, where we offer it, what times, all those types of things, and making it very easy for them to engage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Rosie Samples.
Thank you. Question for you all. Like during your survey, of Parks and Rec activities, did you rank them by importance of those individuals? Did they say whether, you know, like we talk about the swimming pools, did they talk about the need for soccer fields or tennis courts? Did they rank, was there any kind of ranking as to what was important to them as a resident, what they would like to see? I mean, I hear we're talking about schools, but I know there's some issues with the baseball fields. Was there feedback about soccer fields or anything else other than?
What I can say is that they did rank the services that we currently offer. Each service was in a category, and they were asked on the survey to rank those. So each individual had that opportunity to rank them according to how they felt. As for soccer fields, I know that there were some responses that said that they did wish that we had more soccer fields, and that was in open-ended responses from different people.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And I would only add, unless anybody else has anything, that again, as Brittany said, which actually came out in our parks study that planning did, we have a lot of baseball fields that are sitting fallow. So we heard that it wasn't a I don't think it came across as a criticism of baseball. It's just that we have areas of town that used to have hot stove or Little League. They don't any longer. And so they're questioning more like, hey, can we repurpose these for something that we are doing, whether it's youth football, soccer, or even just as a gathering space?
Mr. Fusco?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just happy to see all you here. I worked with these folks for 10 years, and the thing of it was that whenever you look at Recreation Bureau as a department, if you will, the thing I used to always say is they're always freaking happy. They're always smiling and they're always happy, and that continues, and that continues to this day. It really does. Not only that, but also the fact that there's this can-do spirit. Because the thing of it is, that whenever you go to Recreation Bureau and you say, hey, I got this crazy idea, or this, you know, what about this and what about that? And it's kind of like, well, let's figure out a way to get that done. And that's, Brittany, you and everyone here, that's across the board, that spirit of getting things done. And I appreciate that. And this is a very robust report, and I realize that it took a lot of time, a lot of effort. I'm curious about, you mentioned that the CLCs aren't, it doesn't surprise me that those who know you, like you, I don't think that should be a surprise to anyone whatsoever. The one piece though, the CLC piece, I don't understand that piece of it. People don't know what's available there, or because whenever we had met with the folks from our school board, they had mentioned like how many times that the CLCs were being used outside of school activities. It seemed like it was a pretty good number, you know, but I know we can always do better, and I know you guys are always seeking continuous improvement. I would just like a comment on that piece of it, the CLC piece. Someone could do that.
I think in general, people just were confused about how CLC is related to recreation.
Okay.
And the different opportunities that they could have by using the CLCs. So we plan on doing some creative things to help brand the CLCs so people understand that relationship and that they understand that they are there for them to use.
Yeah, and maybe even like a one, and thinking through like how to communicate, and obviously you guys are doing that. That's part of the mission here in terms of the constituents or the Akron Knights more and more. But this is excellent work. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, thank all of you for taking time away to be here today. I guess I am not surprised by what we are seeing right here at all. My concern is you guys have been given more and more to do, and you're out there more and more than ever before, and hopefully with the budget I will see how this is going to be supported. I don't know how you can take on more than what is already here, but I want you to know I'll be looking at the budget very closely to make sure, as you have a vision, that we are supporting it completely on our end so that you can do more of what we see right here. And I want to thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Keith.
Councilwoman. I would only add that one of the tough things I remember at our kickoff dinner, one of the tough things is that, you know, the results of this may mean that we stop doing some things because people want us to do other things more. And so what we're going to be cooking up with, you know, John and Brittany and the team and trying to digest this from an administration's perspective is, yes, we now have a pathway forward that we want to support, but there are programs, you know, in this data that might be sacred cows that they're not that the community doesn't support it, but they just want us to do some different things, maybe at that facility or in general. And so what we're going to try to achieve is a supportive budget, to your point, that makes this a reality, both in operating and in capital. But it may mean, and that's what the facility supervisors are doing now, is they're taking a hard look at that data and saying, you know, I really thought people loved this program because it's always full, and they do, but oh my goodness, they really want this. So how do I do that? And then we will take a look and obviously see what we can do additive. But part of a strategy is, I'm a big believer that strategies are worthless if the outcome is what you would do anyway. So some people come out and say more jobs. Well, who's against more jobs? The outcome is what you would do anyway. So some people come out and say more jobs. Well, who's against more jobs? The alternative is no jobs, and no one's going to support that. So strategies mean real choices. So I think some of these facility reports, as you see them, require some further outreach, but it may mean that we may still do this program, but maybe not as robust as we were before because, wow, people really want us to have a program that looks like this.
I know Ms. Sims has a question, but I want to use this as a chance to jump in here. This is excellent work, as you've mentioned. The challenge is always, and we find this out in the community, is after you get everybody together, who's going to do the work? You know, who's going to continue it? So there's one thing I would like to suggest. Ms. Sims mentioned when she wasn't on council, she came and observed some students. At that time, they were working with Brother JoJo and now Dr. Glover. And they came and they gave us insight on what they wanted to see in our rec centers. And I was pleasantly surprised when I read the article in the Beacon. I was like, man, you guys, no criticism. I was like, you could have saved $50,000 by talking to those young people, because they were like, boom, 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 right down the line. But we find that all the time. Again, no criticism at all. But the point I want to suggest, and I know Ms. Schmokel has been, and Mr. Valley, it's been hard for us to get the Park and Recreation Advisory Board together, because most of the people that are on the Park and Rec Advisory Board run a soccer program or a Little League baseball program or something, so it's hard for them to make all the meetings. I don't know if this exists at the rec centers, but if not, to have a advisory board, citizen advisory board at each rec center to give input on what needs to be done, and then they can meet as a collective body, maybe if we reorganize this as a city as a whole, to take some of the workload off of you to continue to move the agenda. Now, I know it's been a matter that has been, I'm just going to say misunderstood down here about the importance of a participatory budget program. But one of the things, emails that were sent out when we requested this meeting, was that people look at the participatory budget best practices. That is used to engage citizens in the process so that they can answer these questions directly for us and help us make these decisions. So be it we use that tool or not, it all goes back, as Mrs. Keith stated, to the budget. Our citizens have to know when we make cuts or when we make sacrifices to do certain things, what the trade-offs are. So from our standpoint, that's how we can support by implementing tools and using technology the best way we can to support that information. But I don't know if there's been any discussion about setting up some type of advisory boards at the different rec centers, and then representatives from those boards come together to support the overall thing. I see you smiling, so there probably has been that discussion. And I know some of you consult very heavily with the groups and have your own ad hoc committees, but
So I will leave it up to our community centers to city supervisors to respond to that, but I can say from the parks perspective, that's what we're trying to achieve, is by setting up those Friends of the Parks groups that all then come together to, so on the park side, we're trying to do that, but on the community center side, I defer.
Okay. So Mrs. Sims and then Mr. Kilby, and then I'll just bullet point my things real quick. You done? Okay, Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hardy, you mentioned aquatics is a top priority, and I agree with that. But did you say we're going to have some splash pools? When would that be? This summer?
So splash pads.
Pads.
So I am not the aficionado in those, but I think all of us who are parents or grandparents have been to one. So it's not a pool. There's no standing water, but you have the jets and you have the buckets of water and things. So yes, we are conceptualizing in the capital budget, you'll see later today, of getting started on some of the capital things relating to this by doing 2 new splash pads in the city in 2019. Now, we've also prioritized in 2019, which is not a line item, but as I was explaining to Council President, overall, and those that have Balch Reservoir and Perkins Pool in your wards, we want to look at that comprehensively at the pools and then start to make recommendations for the 2020 budget for you to hold us accountable to in terms of having that in the 2020. But the splash pads, yes, 2 in 2019. If they come in under budget, we could do 3.
So where do we plan on placing the splash pads?
Sure. So right now there's a pool kind of centrally located at Bald Street, kind of centrally. It's West Hill is my neighborhood. Then we have Perkins Pool on the west side. We have Reservoir Park on the east side. Because we want to get those pools comprehensively, we would like to at least start south and north. So the idea for 2019 would be to look at Joy Park and then a site to be determined in North Hill. But again, you budget, we go out, we do the design. If they're less than what we budgeted for, we could potentially do a third one. And I know we've talked for at least a year or two with Council President Somerville about doing something with the old kiddie pool, which we kind of filled in just to make it look okay. So if there is room in the 2019 budget, Perkins Pool would be the next step to do a splash pad in response to the kiddie pool. But it's part of an overall redesign of those 2 outdoor pools.
So the kiddie pools at Perkins Park?
It's been filled in. It was empty for a long, Jerry, how long has it been? Yeah.
So that's kind of like a waiting pool?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, does a splash pad require an employee to be there to operate it?
So I'm not, Brittany, do you know more? My understanding is you don't, because there's no standing water,
So
but I could be wrong.
Hook it up to a fire hydrant?
Oh, no, it's going to be connected to the water system, yeah, so it'll be much nicer than that. It'll be a permanent installation at those 2 parks.
What about portable splash pads or whatever you want to call them? Can we do that, or is there any reason why we can't?
We could certainly look at that. I mean, I know the mayor, his vision would be, before his time runs out here, to have one in every ward. But obviously, it's always dependent on funds and availability, so I don't think we're saying no to that. Yeah. But I know that people prefer to know where it is. They go frequently. As a parent, I much like taking my kid to, as much as I love the pool, my kids, when they were smaller, loved the splash pads a lot more than pools. So
you know what, let me just give you a little history. Before your time, before this administration, there was a man named Ed Davidian who ran Country Kitchen. He came up with an idea, and it was a pretty well thought out idea, I thought. And he lined up firemen to do the work, and I guess he had some contact with some unions. There was some plumbers that were going to volunteer to do the work, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think they were portable splash pads or whatever you want to call them that would be hooked up to fire hydrants in neighborhoods. Well, the idea didn't go anywhere, and I think it was mostly political. That was a prior administration. That mayor did not like Mr. Davidian for various reasons. So the idea didn't go anywhere. So I was just wondering, Mr. Hardy, if I think Mr. Davidian's still around, even though the restaurant's not there, but he seems to be a concerned citizen. If he wanted to revive the idea, would this administration at least entertain talking to him about that? I think the man still lives in Peninsula, but I mean, it's like, this is something to talk about. It's
Sure.
Good, okay.
Sure.
The other thing I was concerned about is, since aquatics is a very important part, and we only have three pools, 2 outdoor pools, 1 indoor pool. I remember hearing somewhere like city of Toledo, which is not much bigger than us, has about 15. And I know it's a very expensive capital project. We're never going to build more probably. But what I'm concerned about is the hours of operation. I mean, I live close to Reservoir, and it's not open very much in the summertime. Are we planning on expanding the hours a little bit?
So, yes to the previous would be our goal. And when we think about looking at how do we support this plan in the operating budget, I know one of the things, and Jerry and Erica will be happy, and Doug as well, that has been explained to us is the need to keep these pools open longer and on more days. And so that's something that we should be able to take a look at in 2019.
I guess one of the impediments to doing that is the cost of lifeguards, and even being able to find qualified people. You just can't make anybody a lifeguard, as you know. So that's what they always told us, why we don't have more pools. One of the reasons.
It's true.
Yeah, I guess it is, but maybe if you start recruiting lifeguards now, you might have some by summer.
Well, the other thing, too, that I would just remind everybody is that one of the things this plan also, or I should say this group in particular identified, was leveraging partners. Right. And when you have the Y, you have Cole Family Y, there's an indoor pool. I mean, they've been a great partner on the swim lessons. So it's not necessarily that new pools, the proliferation of new pools is a bad idea, but we got to take a look at what is in the community in general. How can we leverage what we have? How can we make what we have the best it can be? I'd hate to build a brand new pool, and somebody who's been, going to Reservoir and Perkins and dealing with what they've been dealing with and say, well, what the heck? So let's make what we have marquee, and then we can go from there.
Let me say this. First off, question. Does anybody know how many lifeguards it takes to run a pool when it's operating? Does anybody have any idea? How many do you need to be there when it's open?
It depends about the number of participants or people that it's actually in the pool at the time.
Right.
It's a nationwide standard. If you have a high population, you definitely need more guards on deck, and it's a ratio that anybody can look up and find.
So how many average would you say for Perkins and Reservoir you need?
I'd say 1 to 25. That's what we operate.
25? At one time. That's different shifts, right? How many? 1 in 25?
1 lifeguard to 25 participants.
Yeah. Okay. One suggestion is, these pools, like Reservoir and Perkins, have deep water in some places, right?
Yes,
do they
sir.
still have diving boards, or do they take those down?
No, sir. No diving.
Okay. Isn't there any way we could just kind of eliminate the deep water and just, so it's not so dangerous for kids to fall in? You may not need as many lifeguards if you did something like that. Is there any way of doing that? Just to cool off. That's what most people go to the pool for, is just to cool off on a hot summer day.
Right, and that is an option that we have looked at, is eliminating the deep end. But we also want to keep that option available because it is important that we do teach these kids to swim, because we won't have lifeguards if we're not teaching anybody to swim.
Yeah. One other thing, real quick, it's just a suggestion. Close to where I live in Goodyear Heights, it abuts Goodyear Metro Park. There was a private swim place called Eastwood, and it closed about 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm just wondering, I guess the family just got tired of running it. It was a really nice place. I just think maybe the city can buy that place and make it into a city swimming pool, but maybe in cooperation with Talmadge or something. Just a thought, Mr. Hardy. I know it's money.
Appreciate
that's
the
scarce, but
suggestion. I would only say that our number one thing right now is making sure that the stuff we have is at the best possible level it can be, and it's staffed appropriately so it can be open.
I understand that.
And then once we get to that point, I think we start looking at...
What about Summit County Metro Parks? Would they, you don't know, you don't work for them, but that seems like since it abuts Goodyear Metro Park, I don't know if they want to, they have some swimming places, don't they? Isn't there
Yeah.
one way out in
Not in
western
the
part
city,
of the
though,
county?
yet.
Silver, whatever it's called, a lake out there? But-
Yep. I mean, I will definitely bring it up with Lisa King. I can tell you that I know that Metro Parks has made a firm commitment to Summit Lake, and they want to build out their presence there over time.
They're going to
And
swim in Summit Lake?
It's safe now.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't there, like, did we dredge the bottom of that yet, or?
We did a
seal
full,
it?
yeah, we did a full environmental study, and it is safe to fish, it is safe to swim, it is safe to go out and kayak, and we look forward to doing
Is
that.
it safe to eat the fish that you catch?
You actually can, yes.
Mr. Mobian, and then I have some questions.
I'd just like to say thank you for your work. I think that the last few things we've talked about today get to the quality of life in our community, and those things are so key to keeping people in our community and making them available, all these resources available. And I was glad to hear that we talked about the fact that a higher percentage of our minority populations are utilizing these facilities because our population has grown in that area. And with poverty increasing and joblessness and those kinds of things, people tend to stay home more. So you have more resources available for people to take advantage of. And so this is really good news. And I, too, we would try to find as much money as we can in our budget to support the things that you've done and the things you're talking about. And I know Mrs. Waynesboro, I know she's still kicking, is going to appreciate you for Ed Davis Center. Because for years, she has conducted her senior citizens meetings there. And there's just a lot of good work going on in the community center. So we will be supporting a lot of the things that you've brought to our attention. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. You know, I remember as a kid, Mr. Kilby's talking about swimming. We used to ride our bikes over to Firestone High School and swim. Do they still make that available? I mean, it was a school at that time, but it's a CLC now, so that dynamic should have to change.
I will
It's
inquire.
a CLC now.
Yes, I will
So,
inquire.
I mean, that's
I
a
don't know.
facility that should be made available to our children to swim. But I don't know what the program, because I can remember riding my bike to,
I mean, I know they still do the community swim lessons through the FAST program, Firestone, Akron, something, I can't, yeah. But you can still sign up and get low-cost swim lessons, but just to go to do open swim, I don't think so. But I will follow up with them.
yeah. I mean, that may be something we may want to look at in our, as we talk about partnerships. Mr. Kilby also mentioned something, and I know we spoke about it. Rochester, New York has a mobile rec center. We don't think about it, those of us that have cars, but some of our rec centers are inaccessible to some people in some communities. It's too far to get to an Ed Davis or Lawton Street if you live on Madison Avenue over by Delia. You know, that's too far to get to. And so some of the things we've talked about is when he talked about the mobile splash pads, is a way for us to even get kind of a feel before we make the full investment, as if we had a mobile rec center. Most of you have probably heard the term called food deserts, where there's only a corner store and they can't get the green stuff. We never think of having a recreation desert. And I'm going to use my ward as an example. Since they took out Rankin Elementary School, if you live on Delia, between Copley and Delia, Hawkins and Madison, until Providence Baptist Church put in their playground, there wasn't a playground in that area. So where would a child go to play? But if we had a mobile rec center that could go to different communities to do things, that's just like a book review. And then you can, that splash pad, you wouldn't have to make the big investment. It's almost like for those of us that remember when they used to do caroms and the stuff at the schools. You know, it was outdoor rec, the rec program would come in and, you know, you'd have those things. So that's one thing, but the other thing is this. I know we've talked about this, and it would have to be tailored to make sure that no one abuses it, but to raise money, Mr. Hardy, our social media, can we look at using that as a revenue-generating thing, find a way to equitably allow partners to advertise on that site? or get them to, you know, I mean, we already have some of those that sponsor these events in here, but as we try to raise revenue, you know, looking at that and sponsoring some of our programs in that way. All right, with that mobile rec center, and this came out in the conversations with Miss Bridget. In those conversations, you know, we had talked about mobile Wi-Fi as well. As a mobile, because then the challenge with Wi-Fi that we found is wherever it is, if the children found out, they're going to be camped out there all the time. But if it's mobile, you can set it up. You know, you have the technology where you can turn it on and turn it off anyways. But that was another thing that came out, possibly. One of the things when we do start talking about fields, if we can make sure that we're in I know there's a group that's working with the school system, but if we can make sure that we're having constant conversation with them so that we leverage our work to the best of our, you know, ability. I know they have some challenges upgrading their fields. We're doing some things. It'd be good if we could collaborate and save on that money. And then I'm sure you talked about the rec centers. Was there any discussion about the fees that people use to rent them? Because I know I got a lot of different rec centers in different parts of the community are used for different things. And one of the things, I shared this with Mr. Valley, was a big thing is, you know, in my community, people, when they have like a funeral, they'll use the rec center. If they don't belong to a church, they'll use the rec center for a repast where people meet afterwards. And I know we changed our policy to some degree, and that kind of hit some people in the pocket. Did any of that come up in any of our discussions?
Mostly the things that did come out is that we are very affordable, and they want us to keep things very affordable. The rentals in general that you're speaking about, we did change our rental agreement last year, and we've increased our rentals actually, but we always work with anybody in the community. If there's a need that they need a community center, and for some reason they are unable to afford that, we always work with them.
What I'd like to ask is, and what I'm asking of you is something that we're asking here of ourselves on council, and I think as a community we've been challenged. You know, we use this term called equity a lot, but how do we implement that in policy? Is maybe just going back and reviewing how your changes have impacted folks and see, just as we see where there's certain demographics, they may feel that our facilities aren't up to speed because maybe they go to, and I'm just going to say this because I know some people do, they go over to across the bridge, you know what I mean? And they go there, or they may compare our park. I remember it was in the paper one time of folks, our neighbors to the north, complaining that we were using their water park too much. You know what I mean? And so they may try to compare us that way. How do our policies, when we put them in place, do they achieve the goal that we initially set for them? Because for some people, where it may not be too expensive for some folks, oh, it's real affordable. For other people, especially using the example that I use at a repast, when they're sometimes struggling just to cover those funeral costs, that little extra money that we're charging could be more. Now, I understand if it's over and above, like if we're opening up the facility brand new, but if the facility's already open, maybe we can take a look at that. I just ask, take a look at that. I just ask if you could survey those who are directly impacted. And then, I know we didn't speak about the neighborhood concerts and things of that nature, but I know I've shared with Mr. Valley and with... I could talk on that, or we could do it the following week. Okay, yeah, because I know it's been a while, but I would like, again, when we talk about making sure that we're equitable throughout the city, one of my concerns for, and Brittany and Mr. Valley have been good at helping me get a couple events in my ward, but when I look at this, Ward 4 has maybe 2. I look at some other wards, they have 10 or 12. You know, so making sure that on our end, that's not necessarily more money, it's just redistributing to make sure that nobody has 2 and somebody else has 12, maybe everybody just has 7, however that can work out. But your input, us communicating with you all and you all communicating with us can help us make that more equal across the board. Those were the only things I saw. And then the other thing is I want to get back to, and please understand me when I say this. Everything we talk about, there's been one word that has come up all the time, and it's budget, 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 budget. We need I'm talking to my colleagues now. But no, I'm talking to you too. I'm talking to the citizens of Akron. We need a way where we can communicate with one another to see what is our priority. I'm sure you use some form of tool to calculate your data. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you did it all by paper. But I'm sure you use some form of technology to calculate your data. Well, for us to be able to support you and for us to be able to work together to engage our citizens, we have to come up with some kind of tool if we don't like the ones that have been presented, so that we can find out how folks want us to spend their money to maximize this plan that we've been presented with. And all the tools accomplish exactly what Mr. Hardy talked about. They increase citizen engagement, citizen participation, so that we get better support for what you all have already done. So my hope is that over the next month and a half, as we look at not just the capital, but the operating budget, we find tools that can sustain the work that you've already done to help us engage citizens, to help us move this ball forward. With that, Ms. Sims?
One part of Mr. Hardy, perhaps Ms. Sokol. You know, I still continue to, between the two four-quadrant map, sort of, that looks at race and other demographics, and then look at the parks themselves. I mean, some of this, I mean, I just find it just hard to kind of, I mean, I'm glad, I guess, that they have the higher approval ratings right in the right-hand quadrant up top, but I mean, I know the places, so I'm just, again, I say, and disproportionately, when we look in that upper right-hand quadrant, we're talking about respondents being African Americans, and is it, again, I want to get at this, is this just the expectations? I just don't want us to look at this and say, well, they're doing swell, so we need to be down here in this lower left-hand quadrant, Firestone Park. And this is not a subtraction from any of those places, but I don't know how, I'm really still having difficulties trying to figure out how this is so. Like, how is, I mean, no disrespect to Ed Davis Center, I love Ed Davis Center, my daughter danced there, yada, 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 but how did Ed Davis Center get up in the right-hand corner at the very top with Mason and then Balch in the center? I don't know how we got there.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to share what I was thinking. One, am I?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to get
Well, she wants to hear from you and then I'll.
Okay. So, first of all, the fact that the study found that our core constituency group, the group that's coming now, loves us, wants, likes what we're doing, being females, African, people of color, and seniors, that's our base. So we talked a lot, and I mean, chime in, that we aren't checking the box and saying, well, those groups are done. I mean, they're our core. They're the people that are coming. We're going to start first with making sure that those programming, that they can keep coming and we retain those loyal customers. When you look at some of the other quadrants on the scale that shows the different demographics, those are opportunities potentially. But I think this group has pretty clearly stated that they want to improve what we have for the people that are coming now and continue to do that. To answer your question about why is Ed Davis a standout?
It's not necessarily why, how did...
So, first of all, and this is not just because he's here, I mean, Jerry is Jerry. So people know, and they like the leadership he provides there. But if you see on the following slide, it gives you an example of how this data is important, but it also isn't the end-all, be-all. So a lot of the people that responded to the Ed Davis, that responded to the survey and said, Ed Davis is where I go, they happen to be a part of a program, Tiny Tots Basketball, and they love it. So if you see there, we use that as an opportunity to say, look, I don't want to put words in Jerry's mouth ever, but like if there's a particular facility that was not rated so high or rated super high, that doesn't mean they're done. Every facility has had to go through the data and figure out, as I said before, wow, we thought we were doing great here, and we are, but I didn't know that people really want this over here. So no facility is done, no group is checked off. It's really just looking at it individually, and Jerry, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
I think basically the reason, I think basically the reason it's high, I think I was blessed. This is my community. I grew up there, and it's a little different. So when we was doing the survey, I'm there. So they was looking at me. I'm telling them what we need, we not, and not saying nobody else did the survey wrong or not wrong, but by being part of the community. And when you tell me what you need, my man, what you need, I need you to fill it. Because at first, people don't want to do that. I ain't got time. So when you go at them and be part of it, I thought it brought me up. That's basic. But as a whole, everybody is doing a great job, regardless of where they're at. It's just pertaining to the people that's there at certain time, at certain events.
So, thank you. And I think that's almost to my point. Are we really getting at meeting the needs of the community? I mean, recently we had a young lady who was here at the press club that talked about the economy of poverty maintenance. And so if you don't have an expectation of, I mean, are we really measuring the right thing? That's what I want to know. I know Jerry too, and I would probably give him straight A's, always.
The other thing I would say is that we left, in the survey, there were a lot of opportunities for people to write whatever they wanted. And so, while some things, as Brittany said, were here's the programs we do now, rate them. We asked them to identify which center they typically go to, if they go to a center. I think that we measured the right things because none of us here are saying that any one facility is done. And no one is saying that, like, you know, well, because we're doing well with females, people of color, and seniors, that we shouldn't cater to them. They're our base. I mean, we have to grow from there. But I think that any survey that I have seen, they did an incredible job of matching the demographics of the community. In particular, went in some cases door to door in certain zip codes to make sure they were asking folks to make sure that those demographics were representative. So I think that, you know, there's a book about this thick with just the responses that were given by people who were non-solicited, and it was everything from some of the wildest and craziest things you've ever heard to a good amount of things about I love this or I don't like that. So I think that they went through all of that as well. So it wasn't just spit out a number. This group went through every single response that was given on every single facility and made sure that was, and I know you want to say something.
Hi, I work at Balt Street, but I know I went everywhere. I had the tablets and paper with me everywhere I went, from the mall to Walmart to the hospital to the colleges to everywhere. So it wasn't like it was a particular neighborhood. I was all over Akron. So I can honestly say that a lot of this stuff is from everybody. So.
Mr. Kilby.
As a follow-up. Oh, as a follow-up. So it's not an indictment of whether or not, thank you, sir. It's not an indictment of whether or not, I think we did a thorough job. Again, my hope is that we're measuring the right thing and we're using the data that we're collecting to meet the need. And I'm, you know, hence my question. I mean, I've laid on the floor trying to figure out forms in folks' office down at Balt Street on many occasions, so I know how helpful they are. But at the end of the day, community centers are where people meet. I mean, it is that common place that you talk about people want to create where we can come and learn about other people and meet new people. And so making sure that we're looking at the data and knowing what this particular two pieces are being used for. I just don't want them to be used in probably.
I think I understand what you're saying, and we have full confidence in this team that that is not occurring. And furthermore, I think that you bring up an excellent point again. One particular community center may have a great, I'm just making this up, might have a great dance program, and then they look at their feedback, and yeah, people like dance, but they want youth, so and there's no youth program. So I think it's as we said, everyone experiences ARB a little differently depending on who you are and where you're from, and the good news is the way they did the survey, which is just incredible. Again, I'm not blowing smoke, it's incredible. Every facility has that data, so you have our commitment from and Brittany and John and everybody. Every community center supervisor and everyone that works in rec is looking at that data, trying to figure out how they can make sure they're meeting the needs based upon what people said they wanted.
Thank you.
Mr. Kilby, but to speak to Mrs. Sims Park, when I look at this data, and if I was to lay it over other surveys that take place, I mean, what I see as far as those that are in the lower quadrant are those basically that potentially have more resources to have access to other opportunities. Majority of them don't have any children, so they have more disposable income. I would think if you don't have children are expensive, you have more disposable income. It looks like majority of them have greater opportunity because they have graduate degrees. And if we lay this over everything else that we look at, predominantly, well, it says Caucasian and male, so I don't know. But if we lay it over all the other things where we see economic opportunity, disparity, whatnot, it's going to lay right over there. Now, we have an opportunity to address some of those, but we'll never be able to be it used to be Scandinavian, so some folks that have money, those are the ones that are going to go to other clubs, but I understand my colleagues' concern, but when I look at that, that's what jumps out to me right away. Yeah. That information mirrors exactly what we see in some other surveys that talk about things in this community. Mr. Kilby.
I just had a real quick question. Are the two municipal golf courses part of the Parks and Recreation Department?
No, they're a separate entity.
Okay.
Okay. I had a question, but now that you said that, they are a separate entity, meaning somebody is leasing them from us?
No, they're in public service instead of recreation.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
But they're still city assets?
They're still, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Just a couple things, because I know we have to get ready to run, and I want to make sure if anybody else has a question. Looking at, before we get through the total budget process, would like to talk about Lot 3. Appreciate the email that came out, sent it out to people to get folks' input, because that is one asset that is important, I think, to all of us. Made a note on something else, and I can't read my notes, so I'll have to say thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members of committee or from council? If not, again, thank you for coming down. We'll definitely be working with the administration to see how we can support the work that you guys have done.
So, Mr. Keith, is the Housing Committee on tap right now?
We have two more committees to meet, Rules and Utilities. Okay? Utilities canceled. Did anybody tell Utilities that they canceled? Okay. Right. Right? Yeah, Rules is going to meet right now.
No, you got another presentation, Ellen.
Rules Committee, would you please take your seats? Rules Committee?
I don't know how we're going to do it. Tara.
Thank you.
Are you still having your presentation? Okay.
The Rules Committee will come to order. We are missing Councilwoman Amobian and Councilman Freeman. Oh, okay, Ms. Amobian is here. Councilman Freeman is not here. Okay, I would like to have an approval for the minutes from our past meeting. I have a motion, a second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes pass. Okay. We'll take time on our old piece that we have on the agenda. We have a new piece before us today. This new piece is a resolution expressing support for the application. It is not. The resolution is expressing disapproval of the partial government shutdown and declaring an emergency. Is there someone that would like to speak on this? Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Chairwoman. This is just a piece expressing our concern and opposition to the current governmental shutdown. Looking even beyond where we are now, currently we have about approximately 800,000 federal workers who are either unpaid or on furloughs. In Ohio, there's about 4,800 families. The bigger concern is what's coming down the track if we don't deal with the shutdown is our current residents in the state of Ohio and here in Summit County and Akron who are receiving SNAP benefits. Currently, we have enough resources to fill the need of those 1.6 million folks who are receiving SNAP benefits through February. But the concern is once we get past February, we'll have families who are unable to eat or meet just basic needs of nutrition for children. So to that end, we just wanted to express our opposition to the shutdown and wanted that as a matter of record. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fusco, Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you, Chair Keith. Just want to echo everything that co-sponsor had mentioned in reference to this temporary, partial, whatever they want to call it here, in terms of the shutdown. I don't think we should be surprised. I think it's very clear that then candidate for president made very clear their sentiment and their thoughts about civil servants. And I asked my colleagues on council to stand with civil servants. It was very clear that there was a negative, I don't know how to put this, but negative comments were put out there and discussed during that campaign time about civil servants. And that, for sure, it shouldn't be a surprise, again, I think, for all of us. Secondly, from what I understand, Mr. Hardy has mentioned, now what we're going to see is we're going to see some of those grant funds that we typically receive from the federal government for programs such as CDBG, such as the Tiger, the Tiger grant that we're utilizing for Main Street, as well as the SAFER grant for safety forces. Those types of things, we're going to have to delay and wait. I don't know if Mr. Hardy would have a comment about that. I know you've been watching, the impact that this is going to have on the city itself. But I also want to acknowledge, too, that this will have a negative impact, obviously, on some of our citizens that receive benefits from the federal government as well in various forms. But, Mr. Hardy?
No, just, you're absolutely right, Councilman, as I've kept you and Council President Somerville up to date. Melinda Samsel in our office, who's City Grants Manager, has been monitoring along with everybody in each department who has a federal grant to make sure we know before we get even close to an issue, and then you know before we get close to an issue. But every day that passes in a shutdown puts federal drawdowns in a precarious situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Yes. Is there anyone else on the committee? Councilman Hoke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the resolution and the disapproval of the partial government shutdown. The one thing in the resolution, and I would ask the sponsors to look at as far as an amendment to this, in that section 1, where it says that the council for the City of Akron disapproves of the federal government shutdown and urges President Donald Trump to end the shutdown. I would like to have an addition to that as to where we would not only urge President Donald Trump, but we would urge the congressional leaders to look at the end of the shutdown, and to the Congress members in the Democrat and Republican Party. And I think there's a little bit of everybody down there in Washington that needs to look in the mirror and see exactly what's going on and what can be done. And I would like to see that amended into that it would include more than just the President of the United States. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Councilman Hoke has suggested an amendment to this. We will open this up for discussion now for this amendment. Is there anyone who would care to add or?
Do you need a second?
Well, if you want to, you may, but I just wondered if there's any discussion that wanted to go on, but you may second if you like. Now we will discuss then. That is a motion that you just made.
I just wanted to say, as an author of the piece, I'm certainly not opposed to doing that, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sims. Is there any discussion? Councilman Fusco?
We can ask the law department to assist us in terms of either amendment or a substitute, just to add that language.
Okay. So there's been an amendment, motion made, a second. On the committee, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And we will look forward to seeing that amendment and then having it come before us again. Okay. Is there anything else to come before the Rules Committee? Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, there's two things. One, in relation to this piece, a lot of communities are trying to see how they can assist those federal workers in their communities that are being adversely impacted. You see restaurants and things honoring those who come from there. I don't know how long this is going to go, but to Mr. Hardy, since you're here for the administration, have we ever, and this comes to mind because, you know, we always give some type of reprieve to people during the holiday season with their water bill. But as soon as the holiday season is over, we cut folks' water who are behind, and I got quite a few calls from people whose water was cut off. As a way to assist, I'd like to suggest that we take a look at if someone has proof that they are a federal worker, where we can, you know, extend their water bill. That's one way where we can put some weight behind the resolution that we're serving as a way to help them. I mean, in other communities, you see businesses offering free meals or they're doing different things, but not knowing how long this will go. We're not talking about waiving their water bill, just giving them a reprieve. So I'd like for us to think of that. And then also, Madam Chair, in regards to the piece that has been in the Rules Committee for almost maybe 2 years now, I think the last meeting that we just had on Park and Rec, shows the importance of citizen engagement. So whatever it is that's holding up, and I believe the piece that's holding up us looking at the feasibility of establishing neighborhood advisory groups is the question of how do we select those persons. I'd like to ask if next week, if we can have someone from the law department come and speak on that so that we can, week after next, thank you, so that we can move on that piece. I mean, it's been in the committee for almost 2 years. But again, I think what we just saw as far as having engagement from citizens to be able to have input leads to us to at least have a discussion on that piece, please. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I do believe that there was some question about our charter and that piece that was brought in, and since you are the sponsor of that, if you wanted to come forward, it certainly can come forward. So,
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Just a moment, please.
Okay.
So, just for the record, if we could have someone from the law department that would be here next week, that would be able to, in 2 weeks, that would be able to identify the legalities of it all. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Neal?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because I think it's a matter of, in my case, a matter of semantics, but yeah, if someone could come, I think we'd be able to answer the questions on the floor.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, so I believe I presented that to the clerk. Is there anything else to come before the Rules Committee? Hearing and seeing none, we are adjourned. Where have you been?
Okay, we're going to have housing in 1 minute. Housing in 1 minute.
I don't want to make this be twisted. I certainly don't appreciate
No.
Yeah, I'm Donnie.
You don't have to be a 5th grader, but
Yeah. What are we meeting
you want me to
for?
get it so you don't break your
What are we
deal?
meeting for?
Yeah, they do. Yes, they do. Why would I lie to you? Okay? Go to the back.
Please. Anyways, motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So motion.
The minutes are approved from the last meeting. Yeah, I'm Bruce Kilby. I'm Ward 2 Councilman, Chairman of the Housing Committee. We have the full committee here and some other council people present. Councilwoman Samples set this meeting up between ARC and the Housing Committee. ARC Recovery, I guess the executive director is Desiree McKinsey, and she's got it wrong. That's what Tara wrote down. Well, who's the director?
I'm the director.
Okay.
I'm the director.
Okay, whatever. So why don't you ladies introduce yourself, just introduce yourself to the committee. I mean, just briefly introduce yourself.
So my name is Reba McCrae. I am the director of ARC Recovery Services. ARC Recovery Services is a faith-based nonprofit organization. And one of the things that we do, and we do really well, is recovery housing for individuals suffering from substance use disorder and mental health issues. So we take people usually like out of a facility or out of a treatment center, we bring them in, offer them housing, and then we try to help them rebuild their lives like from the ground up.
Okay.
So we try to present a holistic approach for them. We offer them a safe environment, a safe, nice, clean environment for them to live in. We are certified by the state from the Ohio Recovery Housing Association, which just means that we meet like the best quality standards. We use evidence-based practices. We offer programming. We try to help put people's lives back together, help people to become moms again and dads, help them to find employment, housing, get their GED, employment, I said that. We offer peer support, recovery coaching. So we do an array of things so that by the time somebody leaves us, we try to make sure we've hit almost every mark that they have, every barrier that they might have that would inhibit them from moving forward. Okay. And one of the things that we found with housing, with recovery housing, like especially ours that offers programming as well, we're not just housing them, we're trying to help offer them a new way of life, is that it improves people's quality of life, it helps them maintain long-term recovery, it reduces recidivism rates within incarceration and in the Summit County Jail, and it helps people from having to go back through treatment once again, spending tax dollars.
Okay, very good. So, do you other ladies want to introduce yourself to the committee briefly?
Hello, my name is Don Boykin, and I am a recovery coach certified by the state of Ohio.
Thank you.
And she's also been our house manager for the last 4 years, too, so. 6 years.
Where are you located? I know, isn't there a facility on Howard Street, close to the old St. Thomas at ARC?
Actually, that's FAA.
Okay.
Which we did help with, but that's not who we are.
Where?
We are actually on Grant Street. We're the Community of Christ Church, and our nonprofit is stemmed from that organization, and our houses are right across the street in Tara's ward. We're also in Council President Margot's ward as well, so we kind of work together.
Okay.
We have 2 houses. We have a men's house and a women's house, and we're building a new women's Pearl house.
So how long has ARC been in Akron? How long?
Over 25 years.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So Janice? Sorry.
Hello, my name is Janice Beckett. I'm the director of the Women's House, and I've been working with ARC Recovery Homes for about 5 years. It's a program very near and dear to my heart. And, I think that we are set apart in that we do offer that programming, specific programming. It's not just renting a room. It is a campus-based type recovery housing, and there's a lot of support systems in place, and we really walk the women and men through their early recovery, which is very, very important to set a foundation.
I am Desiree McKenzie. I am the executive assistant, not the director, not today.
Not yet.
Yes. And I do most of the administration, office work, billing. I do a little bit of grant writing, as well as creating and editing policies and procedures for our program.
Good, thank you.
And my name's Ari Barrett. I'm essentially the project manager at this time for this specific capital project, although I've served many different roles within the organization.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you're building this close to Summit County Jail? Is that, what street is it on?
It's on Jewel Drive.
What's the name of the street?
It's on Jewel Drive. It's Jewel with 2 L's. And it's actually a street that runs perpendicular between Grant and Sherman. It doesn't go through all the way to Brown, so it's a little bit lesser known.
Okay.
But we are in front of Summit County Jail. Yeah.
So when did you acquire, when and how did you acquire the land? Did you get it from the land bank or something like that?
Yes and no. We actually were gifted 4 parcels last year by a generous donation through Dunn Quigley. We've known Dennis Dunn and worked with him for years. Him having a front seat to our organization and our work, he really wanted to sow into that, so we were blessed to be donated those parcels.
Okay, let me ask a kind of a general question. I've heard of ARC, but I've read over your information and this little flyer. So is it your mission is mostly recovery from, I mean, it says addiction. Does that mean drugs and alcohol?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. You've been doing some good work.
Thank you.
There's a real need for this in our community.
Yeah.
And at that, I'll open it up to any other committee members that want to ask a question. Mr. Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. Is there any significance the name that you chose of the house, the Pearl House?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so the process of a pearl being created is much like the process that these women will go through, and the women who've been through our house have gone through, if I may, so she won't toot her own horn. But Ms. Reba McRae is now the director. 10 years ago, she was our first women's resident. And so, yeah, Ms. Dawn, also through our home. And Janice did not partake in our house specifically, but she was part of another housing program that's very similar to ours. And the Pearl process is that we want to make sure that although people have gone through their trials and tribulations, that we're giving them the opportunity not to erase all of those things, but to use them in the plan that the Lord has for them going forward. So essentially, all of those things will be useful going forward. As you can see, they're now sowing into other women's lives.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you. That is that's great and awesome. Do the ladies, do they spend the night at these homes? And if they have children, are the children housed also there?
In this house, the Pearl House, that is not the case at this time. We have made exceptions, and we are actually making room for a family availability, because in Akron, that's desperate need, yeah. Many of the women obviously do not have custody of their children when they come to be with us. They stay with us for a period of 6 to 18 months. However, I would like to state that our program moving into this women's home specific does give us some wiggle room in the future, and one of our primary goals is to have a house with women and children as well.
So currently, like our house that the women live in now, they do live with us, they stay with us for 6 months to a year, sometimes up to 18 months, however long it takes to help them get their life back together, work their CSB case plan, get their job, get their recovery support. So we want to open a new house for 8 women, and we want to use the current house that we have now to house women with smaller children. Yep. Right.
If I may follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies. Just a comment. I just want to thank you, ladies, for providing such a service that's greatly needed here in Akron. We are the epicenter of the opiate crisis, and boy, I wish we could have more housing for women and for men and for children.
And for children.
When our ladies get in a crisis, the sad part is there's children a lot of times involved, and you guys are. I truly believe are doing the Lord's work, and I want to thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other committee members have any questions?
Thank you. If you all could walk us through your steps leading up to your groundbreaking for your facility, if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we already have approval from the architect and the county for, like, the preliminary drawings have already passed that. We are planning on breaking ground early spring, so March. We will have a 3-week public bid process, obviously, but there are a couple of barriers that we do need taken care of. We are sharing not the parcel itself, but our parcel saddles up to another condemned property. And on that line, there's actually a shared garage, and then another piece of property, or
not piece of property, but a house on that specific parcel that have been condemned by the city for asbestos and other blight. Has it been removed now? So the asbestos has been removed, but we do know, being so close to the community, that there's a lot of criminal activity in that garage and in that abandoned home. So that address is on Sherman, 842 on Sherman. So we are looking and have pressed many avenues to have that taken down as soon as possible.
Any other committee members? Any council members in the chambers asking Ms.
Mogan? Thank you for doing this. It's needed. What I love so much, and I think I've seen you before, I can't remember your name. I love the fact that you are hiring your own and really continuing to give back to women. We just need people to come out of the shadows and reveal their stories, and this is just perfect. So thank you so much for doing that.
Mr. Swartzky?
My name is Swirsky. Swirsky. We've been together 5 years here, so, okay. No, that is not right. First, I want to apologize to you also for the lack of respect that was given about your title. It is something that's earned, and it's nothing to be played with. Secondly, I just wanted to know if there was someone, I don't know if you feel comfortable, would like to talk about the difference this program has made for your life.
Again, my name is Don Boykin. It has made absolutely a world of difference. It's public record. Look it up. 292-628525. By the grace of God, I was introduced to Community of Christ at the time when I came. And I was placed in that home. These women loved me until I learned to love myself. They introduced a whole new outlook on perception, on I found my true identity all over again in Christ, which made the absolute difference, because I had this image of myself based on people, mainly men, society, taboo, what have you. I have 3 degrees. I have love for this type of work. I just love what I am able to give back, what I was given. Not only am I a recovery coach, I have given 110% of my life to this type of work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyways, anyone else have anything? Marilyn Keith, did I get your name right? I'm sorry.
And I apologize, it is so cold sitting over there that I had to move over here, so I apologize. First of all, I want to thank all of you. If you haven't had a chance to get down there to ARC, please give them a call. What you're going to see are people that might have been not swept under the carpet or anything like that, but are given a second chance with a group of people that have an understanding that is so deep and so powerful. So I'm sorry that Pastor Pat isn't here today, but you know, this is going to resonate to him. But if there is anybody that we know that we walk among angels, and we are witnessing this here, and I want you to know that our James Hardy here has the address 842. 842 Sherman. He wrote it down. He's got it, okay? So, you know what? Good things happen. Sometimes it just takes some time, okay? But thank you for believing. So I wanted you to know that. He's written it down. It's golden, okay? So thank you for all that you do.
Any other members? Okay. I have a couple questions. How do you get your clients?
Okay. Am I on? Nope. There we go. I was hoping you would ask that. We get our clients, we are well known throughout the treatment community as well as the correctional community. Oriana is right next door, CBCFs are both there, Summit County Jail. Power Street is not far away. IBH we're good friends with. I work very closely with all of the drug courts. We are the recovery supports for Barberton Municipal Drug Court. I was at Turning Point this morning for Judge Oldfield, who referred somebody. So we get them from all over the county. We do have an assessment process to make sure that people are comfortable with who we are and what they want, because we are faith-based. So, you know, we want people to be comfortable. And we do a screening. We invite them if they're from the city or out in the community, have community access. We ask them to come to church, come to our Friday night ARC meeting, which facilitates about 200 people every Friday, to come for a recovery meeting to see if they like us and if they're going to be comfortable with the requirements that we have. If not, we give them plenty of resources. We have a wealth of resources in Summit County that help with recovery. So that's usually how it goes. We get them from all over the place, so yeah.
And I'm sure you get more applications than you can handle, too.
Hence the new house.
Is there any other agency, whether it's public or private like yours, that's doing similar kind of work in Akron, or that you know of?
You want to go?
We pride ourselves on taking a certain quality aspect to the housing that we provide. There are many providers who are trying to do this work, and there are some that are successful and have done this work in Akron for a long time. I think what you'll find is that within the last 4 to 5 years, there's been the Advocacy Committee for Ohio Recovery Housing that's really tried to take something that was done, I don't want to say under radar of clinical and government agencies, but they've really tried to legitimize the credentials required to do this work. And not every recovery housing provider has gone along with that process. But we have, and there are many providers at different levels of care.
Okay, thank you. I guess I just don't want you ladies to take this the wrong way, but one of the things I learned, I don't know, you guys were following the Second Chance Village thing. I talked to a lot of folks down there that they objected going to, what's the shelter on East Market Street? Haven Arrest, because, well, what they said, I don't know if this is true, they made them pray 3 times a day. And some people aren't religious, some people aren't Christian, some people don't want to hear it. So, and I understand what Christian grace is, and you ladies are performing that, and I think that's good. But do you require these clients? You said something about you invite them to come to your meeting. Okay, is that mandatory? I mean, do they have to pray with you guys, or? And I'm sure you want to encourage it, but like I said, some people maybe don't want to do that.
Right, some people are really not comfortable with that, and so then we try to gear them towards a housing that might better suit their needs, because our goal is for everyone to have a better quality of life, to do well in their recovery, so they might not like what we have to offer. We do ask you to come to church with us, because one of the other things that I offer is I offer a whole community of people who are now going to lift you up, encourage you, help you, pray for you. We do all of those things. However, our church is not like a Methodist church. We're not Baptist. Our pastor is a person in recovery for 35 years. Most of the messages have to do with spiritual principles about recovery. Now, We are faith-based, we do love Jesus, but we also believe in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we allow people to go to whatever kind of meeting is going to suit their need. We offer them a recovery coach that does help them find a path for their recovery. Many people like to come to our church just because of the spiritual principle based of it, not necessarily the Christ message, which we hope everyone gets. But we did just have like a Buddhist who lived with us. He enjoyed our place. He just moved out recently. But you don't have to believe. We just want you to come, and we want our people to love on you a little bit. So
That's good.
Yeah.
Does anybody else on the panel want to say anything?
Yes, to your question, I've been a person in recovery for 12 and a half years, and I actually was on the streets in your ward. So it's really a blessing for me to get to work in the same area where I was homeless and using. That said, it was mentioned that I went through a different housing program, although very parallel in requirements to what the ARC House is. And I found the Community of Christ Church 12 and a half years ago. When I got clean, I was pregnant. I was scared to death to walk into a church for fear of judgment. When I walked in the Community of Christ Church when I was in treatment, I was welcomed with open arms and with love, and I have never left. And that is really what we try to give the individuals that come through our homes is not, we don't ever want to shove anything down people's throats, but what we do is love and accept them right where they are, and then let them make their own decision.
Good, very good. Anybody else? Okay. Listen, Councilwoman Samples.
Just in closing, I just want to say thank you to you ladies. You have been such a breath of fresh air for me. Many know this is my love, my passion is mental health and addiction, and to just sit and talk with Desiree and Reba, you just, and I thank Councilwoman Somerville because she called me and said, you have to meet them. You are going to love them. And she was right, and I just thank you all for your work, and Ms. Boykin, your story. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I want to cry with you. But you guys have friends down here, and so 842 Sherman Street, just thought I'd put that back out there again. And thank you all. Keep doing what you're doing because I think where you've been and where you've come from is going to help somebody else come through, and I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Okay, with that, ladies, I just want to say thank you for coming down. Thank you for doing this important work in our city, and have a good day. And one last thing, make sure you invite council to your groundbreaking or your open house when you get the place finished. So,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.